It was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. I had planned everything to perfection. His birthday, my son's birthday, was meant to be a celebration of everything he had grown to love. The cake was already waiting in the kitchen, the gifts neatly wrapped and stacked, and the balloons fluttered with bright celebratory colors in every corner of the living room. There was a palpable excitement in the air, one that should have filled his heart with joy. But I never could have anticipated the moment that would shatter everything. The day began like any other, or at least it seemed like it would. I woke up early, kissed his forehead as he slept peacefully, and whispered a quiet, happy birthday to him. His birthday was more than just a special day to me. It was a chance to show him how much I adored him, how much I was willing to sacrifice for his happiness. I wasn't just giving him presents, I was giving him the love I had built around him since the day he was born. When he awoke, I saw the sparkle in his eyes. That was the moment I knew this day would mean everything to him. He bounded out of bed, his smile bright, his energy contagious. The house was filled with the sound of his laughter as he ran around, opening cards, tearing off wrapping paper, his joy echoing through every room. It was the type of birthday any child would dream of. And yet, something felt off. A quiet unease clung to the edges of my thoughts, but I brushed it aside. Maybe I was just tired from all the planning. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But then, it happened. We were sitting at the table, surrounded by food and laughter, when he suddenly stopped. His smile faltered for a split second, just long enough for me to catch it. Before I could ask what was wrong, he blurted it out. "Where's my gift?" The words stung. He wasn't asking with excitement or joy. There was a sharpness in his tone, a demand that pierced through the bubble of happiness I had so carefully constructed around this day. I stared at him, not knowing how to respond. He didn't smile, didn't laugh. He just stared at me with wide eyes, waiting for an answer. His gaze felt cold, accusatory even. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. The music from the speakers stopped playing, and the noise of his friends in the background faded into nothing. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart, echoing in my ears. My hands trembled as I reached for the gift I had placed on the counter earlier, a symbol of my love, my dedication. It was something I had spent weeks choosing, something I had thought would make him happy. But now, as I held it in my hands, the weight of it felt unbearable. His disappointment loomed over me like a storm cloud, suffocating every ounce of joy that had been present moments before. "Here you go, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile as I handed him the gift. "I thought you'd love this." He glanced at it, his face unreadable. Without a word, he ripped the wrapping paper off in one swift motion, revealing the shiny new video game console I had saved up for months to buy. It was the one thing he'd been talking about nonstop for weeks. He had even dropped hints about it in front of his friends. I thought it would be the perfect surprise, the thing that would make this day unforgettable. But as the box came into view, his expression twisted, a mix of frustration and something I couldn't quite place. He looked at me, his lips curling into a frown. "Seriously?" he muttered, his voice dripping with disappointment. "Is this it?" I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean? It's exactly what you wanted, right?" His eyes narrowed. "I wanted something special, not just another thing." His words hung in the air, heavy and cutting. "You should have known. I don't even want this." The room seemed to close in on me. I could hear his friends in the background, whispering, their chatter fading as everything became focused on that one horrible moment. My heart was racing now, panic creeping in as I struggled to understand what was happening. Had I done something wrong? Had my best not been enough? I'm sorry, I stammered, my voice barely audible. "I thought you'd love it." But he wasn't listening anymore. He pushed the gift aside, grabbed his phone from the table, and stormed off to his room, slamming the door behind him. I stood frozen in place, my hands still trembling, my heart shattered into a million pieces. I had tried so hard. So hard. And yet, all I felt in that moment was an overwhelming sense of failure. I could hear him muttering angrily behind the door, his words too muffled to make out, but the tone was clear. He was livid. It wasn't just the gift. It wasn't about the video game console. It was something deeper. Something I wasn't seeing. And then, a strange thought flickered through my mind. What was he really upset about? Was it about the gift at all? Or was it something else that had been building up? Something I had missed? Was this about me? About him? Or was this something I couldn't even begin to understand? I needed answers. But I also knew I had to let him cool down. Maybe this was just a phase, a moment of teenage rebellion, of frustration bubbling over. He was growing up, and I was struggling to keep up with the changes in him. But the gift. That gift, the one I thought would bridge the gap between us, to show him how much I cared, had become the very thing that tore us apart. I glanced down at the gift on the table. It was still wrapped in its pristine paper, the corners perfectly creased. To anyone else, it might have seemed like just a simple present. But to me, it had been a symbol of my love and sacrifice. It had been my way of saying, I'm here for you. I see you. And yet, all I could feel now was the weight of his disappointment. A disappointment I wasn't sure I could ever fix. The house was eerily quiet. In the aftermath of my son's outburst, the once joyful atmosphere of the party had evaporated. The laughter, the music, the chatter, all of it had been swallowed up by a thick, suffocating silence. I stood frozen in the kitchen, my hands gripping the edge of the counter as though it could anchor me in place. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound, a reminder of how alone I felt in that moment. I hadn't moved for what seemed like an eternity. The cake sat untouched on the table, the balloons floating in the corner, their vibrant colors mocking me with their cheerful defiance. And there was the gift, still wrapped, still perfect in its pristine paper, but utterly meaningless now. I had no idea what had just happened. How had everything gone so terribly wrong? I glanced at the clock. It had been almost an hour since he stormed off to his room. I could still hear him occasionally muttering, but there was no sound of him leaving his room, no sign that he was willing to talk. And I didn't know if I was ready to face him. Was it my fault? Was I failing him as a mother? Did he hate me now? The questions bounced around in my mind like ping-pong balls, but none of them could find an answer. I walked over to the dining table and sank into the chair, my face buried in my hands. Tears stung the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Suddenly, I heard the sound of footsteps, heavy, slow, deliberate. They were coming down the hall. My heart skipped a beat as I wiped my eyes quickly, trying to compose myself. Was it him? Was he coming to yell at me again? But when the door creaked open, it wasn't his angry face I saw. It was his little sister, Mia. She stood there, her wide brown eyes staring at me with concern, her fingers nervously fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "Mom, is everything okay?" Her voice was soft, tentative. I didn't know how to answer her. She had always been so sensitive, so aware of the moods around her. She had seen me upset before, but never like this. Never because of her brother. I forced a smile, but I knew it was weak. I couldn't lie to her. I'm just trying to figure things out," I replied, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. "Your brother's upset, and I don't know why." Mia hesitated, her eyes darting toward the door to her brother's room. She clearly wanted to go in and see him, but something held her back. She wasn't sure if it was safe yet. I couldn't blame her. I had no idea what had set him off, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized that maybe I had never really understood him at all. "Do you want me to talk to him?" Mia asked quietly. I shook my head. "No, sweetie. He needs space," she nodded, her expression filled with a maturity that made me ache with guilt. She was only 10, yet she seemed to understand more about relationships than I did. I had spent so much of my time trying to fix everything, trying to make it all perfect for them. But in the end, I had forgotten one simple truth. Sometimes, things don't need fixing. Sometimes people just need to be heard. Mia stepped closer, her small hand resting on mine. "I'll be okay, Mom. You don't have to fix everything." Her words hit me like a wave, and for the first time that day, I felt a flicker of something other than panic. I realized that in my desperation to make everything right, I had missed something vital. I wasn't the only one struggling with the changes in our family. My son, too, was growing up, but I had failed to recognize the emotional distance growing between us. I had focused so much on the external, the presents, the party, the celebrations, that I had forgotten to connect with him on a deeper level. "I know," I whispered, squeezing her hand in return. "I know, Mia. I'm just lost right now." Mia smiled gently, as if she understood. "Maybe you just need to give him time. He'll come around." I hoped she was right. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about giving him space. It was about something bigger. Something that had been building up for far longer than this. Birthday, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face it. The minutes dragged on. I sat at the kitchen table, lost in my thoughts, replaying the events of the day over and over in my mind. What had gone wrong? Where had I failed him? And more importantly, why had he acted this way? The gift should have been the answer. It should have been the symbol of my love for him, the proof that I saw him, that I understood him. But in his eyes, it had become just another disappointment, just another reminder of how far apart we were. I stood up suddenly, the urgency of the moment pushing me into action. I couldn't sit here and let the day slip away like this. I needed to talk to him. I had to find out what was really going on, what was festering underneath his angry outbursts. Taking a deep breath, I stood in front of his bedroom door. I could hear him behind it, pacing, muttering to himself. I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles could make contact, the door swung open. There he was, my son, standing in front of me with that look of defiance still in his eyes, but also something else. Something softer, something I couldn't quite place. "Mom," he said, his voice quieter now, "can we talk?" I stepped inside, my heart beating faster. This was it, the moment where everything could either heal or break beyond repair. "Of course," I said softly, trying to steady my breath. "What's going on, sweetie? Why are you so upset?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he crossed his arms over his chest and looked at the floor. For a moment, the silence between us felt like a chasm too wide to bridge. But then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to make you upset. It's just, I don't know how to say it. I don't feel important anymore. You're always so busy. It's like I don't matter." My heart stopped. Those words cut deeper than anything I could have imagined. His words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "I don't feel important anymore." The pain in his voice struck me harder than anything I could have prepared for. All the planning, all the effort I'd put into making his birthday special, it hadn't even mattered. What mattered was the deep, unspoken feeling that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what he had just said. How had I missed this? How had I missed him? My son, the one person I had promised myself to always put first. I thought I had been giving him everything, but in his eyes, it was never enough. I walked into his room and sat down on the edge of his bed, my heart racing. He didn't look up at me, his gaze still fixed on the floor, his arms wrapped tightly around his chest, as if trying to protect himself from the world. From me. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I had no idea you felt that way. I thought I was doing what you needed. But clearly, I failed you." He finally lifted his head, and for the first time since this storm began, I saw something in his eyes. Vulnerability. The mask of anger and defiance slipped for just a moment, and I caught a glimpse of the boy I had known. The one who had once crawled into my lap for comfort, the one who had looked up to me with admiration. "Mom, I'm not saying you don't care," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "I know you love me. But it feels like you're always distracted. You're always focused on something else. And I'm just here, waiting for you to notice me." I felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling. My heart broke for him, for the child I had let slip into the background while I focused on everything else. Work, responsibilities, expectations. I had been so consumed with doing the right things for him that I had forgotten the most basic, the most important thing. Simply being there. Really being there. "I didn't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know you felt that way. I thought I was doing everything right." He shrugged, still looking away. "I know you're trying. But it's not enough. I don't want just the stuff. I want you. I need you to see me, not just as your son, but as me, the person I'm becoming. But you're always too busy with everything else." A wave of guilt washed over me. I had been so caught up in making sure everything was perfect for him, from the gifts to the celebrations, but I had overlooked the most fundamental need of all, the need for connection, the need for presence. My heart ached for him, for his pain and the distance I had created without even realizing it. "I'm sorry," I repeated, my voice thick with emotion. "I've been so focused on what I thought you needed. I forgot to see you for who you are. I've been so busy trying to give you everything, but I never stopped to ask if that's what you really wanted. You don't just need things. You need me to be there. Really there. And I haven't been. I haven't been the mother you needed me to be." He looked up at me, and for a moment we just stared at each other. His eyes were still filled with hurt. But there was something else there now, too, a glimmer of hope. As if my admission of failure, my raw vulnerability, had cracked open a door that had been shut for far too long. "You're not a bad mom," he said softly, though his voice still carried the weight of his frustration. You just don't get it sometimes. I need more than just the stuff you buy me. I need more than just the birthday parties. I need to know you're there for me. I need to know you care about me, not just what I can do or what I have." His words cut deeper than anything he had said earlier, but in a way, they also brought a strange sense of relief. He wasn't rejecting me. He wasn't giving up on me. He just needed me to be more present, more aware of him, his needs, and his world. And I had been so lost in my own whirlwind that I had missed it. "I've been a fool," I whispered, my heart heavy with the truth. "I've been so focused on the wrong things." He didn't respond at first. Instead, he just sat there beside me, his hands resting in his lap. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken emotions. For a long while, neither of us spoke. We simply shared the space, each of us coming to terms with the distance that had grown between us. I reached out and gently placed my hand on his, my fingers curling around his warmth. "I want to fix this," I said, my voice steadying with determination. "I want to be the mother you need. Not just for your birthdays, not just for the gifts, but for everything. I will see you, I promise." For the first time that day, a small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. It wasn't much, but it was something, a crack in the wall between us. "Okay," he said, his voice barely audible but filled with something new, trust. "But I need you to mean it." "I do," I said, squeezing his hand. "I do, more than anything." In that moment, I realized that what I had been missing wasn't just his presence, it was my own. The gift wasn't in the material things I could give him. The gift was me. My attention, my time, my understanding, and I had almost lost it all by focusing on the wrong things. As I sat there beside him, I felt a shift, a promise between us to try again, to rebuild what had cracked, to mend the invisible rift that had grown between us. It wouldn't be easy. It would take time. But we were taking the first step, together. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the weight of the conversation we'd had. It echoed in my mind, replaying over and over. I need you to see me. Those words had lodged themselves deep in my heart, impossible to ignore. The guilt had begun to seep into my every action, every word, and it was a constant reminder of how I had failed my son. It wasn't just about the birthday anymore. It wasn't about the gifts or the party. It was about something deeper, something I had been too busy to see. The way he had been drifting, the way he had been silently screaming for my attention, for my love, for my presence. The truth was, I had been neglecting him in a way I hadn't even realized. In my attempt to give him everything, I had forgotten to simply be there for him. I woke up the next morning with a newfound sense of urgency. Today would be different. I wasn't going to let the distance between us grow any larger. I wasn't going to let him slip through my fingers like this. I knew it would take time, but I was committed to making things right. I had to. I spent the morning in his room. He didn't expect it. Neither did I. But I walked in without knocking, and there he was, sitting at his desk, headphones on, his face illuminated by the soft glow of his computer screen. "Hey," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. He didn't immediately look up. His fingers paused over the keyboard, but he didn't make any attempt to remove the headphones. I waited, unsure of how to begin. How could I repair something so fragile, something so broken in such a short time? How could I fix the years of unnoticed distance, the quiet neglect that had piled up in silence? I stood there for a few moments before I took a deep breath and stepped closer. "I was thinking about what you said the other day," I started, my voice soft but steady. "And you were right. I've been so focused on the wrong things. I haven't been the mother you need. But I'm going to change that." Finally, he took off the headphones and turned to face me. His eyes were guarded, but I could see the faintest glimmer of hope. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "I'm listening," he said, his tone cautious but not dismissive. I sat down on the edge of his bed, the weight of the moment making my chest tight. "I know I've been distant," I continued, my heart pounding in my chest. "I've been so caught up in trying to do everything right that I've forgotten to just be with you. I've been trying to give you things, but I haven't been giving you what you really need. I haven't been here." His gaze softened slightly, but he didn't speak. He just listened, his expression unreadable. And that was fine. I wasn't expecting him to immediately forgive me. But I needed him to know that I was willing to do the work, willing to be present for him in a way I hadn't been before. "I've been focused on what you could have, but I haven't been paying attention to what you want, what you need. And that's something I want to change. I'm sorry for not being there when you needed me the most." He looked down for a moment, his fingers tracing the edge of his desk. I watched him carefully, knowing that the next few moments could change everything. His silence was deafening, but I refused to pull away this time. I had spent so much of my life running from uncomfortable moments, but not anymore. Not with him. Finally, he spoke. "It's not just about you being busy," he said quietly. "I get that. But it feels like I don't matter sometimes. Like I'm just another thing on your list." His words hit me like a punch to the gut, but they weren't said with anger. They weren't even said with bitterness. It was just truth. And that truth was something I had been avoiding. The pain in his voice wasn't a result of him being spoiled or ungrateful. It was the pain of being overlooked, of feeling invisible in the home that was supposed to be his safe haven. "You matter," I said quickly, before I could lose my nerve. "You matter more than anything to me. But I can't keep pretending that everything's fine when it's not. I've been so caught up in other things that I haven't seen you. I haven't seen how you need me." He was silent for a long time, staring at me with that same guarded look in his eyes. It was as if he was deciding whether to believe me, whether to let his guard down again. And I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if things would get better instantly, or if this would be another empty promise. I just knew that I had to try. After what felt like an eternity, he sighed and shook his head. "I don't know if things will ever be the same," he muttered, not looking up. "I don't know if I can just forget how I felt for so long." "I don't expect you to," I said softly. "But I do expect to show you that I can do better. I want to earn back your trust. I want to be the mother you need me to be. And I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to try." He didn't answer right away, but there was a shift in his body language. He wasn't pulling away anymore. He wasn't pushing me out. He was allowing himself to be seen, to be heard. And that was all I needed in that moment. An opportunity to prove to him that I could be the mother he deserved. "I don't expect you to forgive me all at once," I added, my voice steady. "But I'll keep showing up. I'll keep trying. That's a promise." He didn't say anything else, but for the first time, I saw a faint smile tug at the corners of his lips. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was there. And for me, it was everything. The days after that conversation felt different. Not easy. Not perfect, but different. There was a subtle shift in the air between us, as though a wall that had been built up over years of unspoken pain and misunderstandings had started to crack. It wasn't instant, and it certainly wasn't without its setbacks. But it was a start. I could feel the weight of my son's hesitation each time we spoke. He was cautious, as if waiting for me to break my promise, to fall back into old habits of distraction, of giving him things but not really seeing him. And every time I saw that caution in his eyes, I was reminded of how much work I had to do, how much I had to prove. But I wasn't giving up. Not this time. The week that followed was filled with small steps, moments that weren't monumental, but were important nonetheless. A morning where he didn't immediately retreat into his room, choosing instead to sit with me at the breakfast table asking about my day. A quiet evening where we sat together, not speaking, but simply sharing the same space. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences, moments of uncertainty. But it was more than I had hoped for in the aftermath of that heated argument. One evening, about 4 days after our conversation, I was sitting at the kitchen table sipping my tea when he walked in. His eyes were still a little guarded, but he didn't look away when I met his gaze. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't looking for a reason to shut me out. He was just there, with me. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice quiet but steady. Can we talk?" I felt my heart race. This was it. Another opportunity to prove that I could be the mother he needed, to continue earning back his trust. "Of course," I said, setting down my cup, my hands suddenly feeling clammy. "What's on your mind?" He sat down across from me, his body leaning forward slightly as if unsure of how much to say. "I've been thinking about what you said, about wanting to be more present and all that." I nodded, encouraging him to continue, even though my stomach twisted with nerves. Was this where I would see him pull away again? Was he about to shut down? "I think I'm ready to try," he said, his voice quiet but filled with sincerity. "I mean, I don't know if things can go back to how they were, but I want to give you a chance to show me that you're not going to just forget again." I swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling deep in my chest. This was it. This was the moment where everything could either be rebuilt or fall apart completely. I could feel the gravity of the situation. He was opening himself up to me, allowing me to prove myself to him again. And I couldn't afford to fail. "I don't expect it to be easy," I said softly, my voice filled with emotion. "But I will keep showing up. I won't stop trying, I promise you that. You matter more than anything to me. And I'm not going to let that go." He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. But then, something in his eyes softened, just enough for me to see it. A flicker of trust, fragile but real. "Okay," he said quietly. "Let's try." I felt my heart swell with relief, a tear threatening to spill from the corner of my eye. He wasn't ready to forgive me completely, and I knew it would take time for the wounds to heal. But this was progress. This was the first step toward something better, something real. After that conversation, things continued to shift. Slowly, but steadily, the distance between us began to shrink. It wasn't always perfect. There were moments when the old patterns would creep back in, when I would get caught up in my own distractions and he would retreat into silence. But each time, I reminded myself of the promise I had made, to keep showing up, to keep trying. One afternoon, about a week after our talk, I was sitting on the couch, lost in my thoughts, when I felt him sit down beside me. I looked up, surprised to see him so close, his posture less tense than usual. "Can I ask you something?" he said, his voice tentative. "Of course," I replied, turning to face him. "What's up?" He hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I was thinking, I don't want you to just be around. I want you to really be here, you know? Not just when I need something, but all the time. I don't want to be invisible anymore." The weight of his words hit me hard, but in a way they felt like a gift. He wasn't just asking for attention, he was asking for something deeper. He wanted to be seen for who he was, not just as my son, but as a person with his own needs, his own struggles. "I hear you," I said softly, my heart aching with the depth of his words. "I promise I'll be here, really here. No more distractions, no more missing what matters most." He nodded, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw him smile. A real smile, one that reached his eyes. It was small, but it was enough. It was a sign that we were moving forward, that things were changing. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would still be moments of doubt, times when the walls would go up again, times when I would slip back into my old habits. But I was ready. Ready to fight for this relationship, ready to rebuild what had been broken. And I knew, deep down, that if we both kept trying, we could find our way back to each other. The weeks that followed felt different. Not without their challenges, of course, but different. There was a new kind of understanding between us, one forged through honest conversations, vulnerability, and the kind of quiet, day-to-day effort that was often far more powerful than grand gestures. I had started seeing my son, truly seeing him, in ways I hadn't before, and he had begun to see me, not just as the mother who provided, but as someone who was willing to change, to grow, and to meet him where he was. I spent more time with him. It wasn't always perfect. Sometimes he still retreated into his world of screens and solitude, and there were moments when I was tempted to pull away myself. But each time I resisted, each time I chose to stay in the uncomfortable silence or awkward pause, I knew I was doing the right thing. There were mornings where we simply sat together, sharing breakfast in the quiet comfort of one another's company. Even on the busiest days, I made sure to carve out moments to talk, to really talk, about anything and everything. It didn't matter if we were discussing something trivial or something important. The point was, I was there, and I was listening, and most importantly, he was opening up. One evening, about a month after that pivotal conversation, we sat together in the living room, both of us tired from the day's work. I had just returned from a long meeting, and he had finished his homework, his face buried in his phone as usual. I had learned to give him space, to respect his boundaries. But that night felt different. There was a strange calm in the air, a quiet between us that felt just right. I set my things down on the table and looked over at him. His gaze was soft, and for once, he wasn't fidgeting with his phone. He was just there. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice calm but serious. I nodded, my heart skipping a beat. Of course. He shifted in his seat, turning to face me fully. I've been thinking about something, he began, his voice steady, about how things used to be. I know I was mad at you, and I know things were messed up for a while. But I think I get it now. I see you trying. I see that you care. And I'm starting to see me too. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It was hard to believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just a child acknowledging an apology. This was him recognizing the effort, the growth, and the change in both of us. I'm sorry, too, he continued. I didn't make it easy on you. I didn't always tell you what I needed. But I think I'm starting to understand how important it is to talk about stuff. To really be honest with you, like you've been with me. I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I held them back. This moment, this conversation, was everything. It wasn't the kind of apology I had expected. It wasn't wrapped up in neat words or perfect explanations. It was messy and raw and so full of sincerity that it made everything we'd been through worth it. I'm proud of you, I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. I'm so proud of you for understanding that. We're both learning, and we're both changing. And I'm here. I'm here for all of it, for all of you. He smiled then, a small but genuine smile that lit up his face in a way that I hadn't seen in years. Thanks, Mom, he said softly. I think we can do this. And in that moment, I truly believed it. I believed that we could do this. Not perfectly, not without setbacks or struggles, but together. We were finally on the same page, finally seeing each other for who we truly were, not just mother and son, but two people. Connected by love and the willingness to grow. The healing, I realized, wasn't just about fixing the cracks. It was about learning to live with them, accepting that we were both flawed, both human, and both capable of change. There would be more bumps along the road, more days of doubt, more moments when I'd wonder if I was enough. But there would also be more conversations like this, more moments of honesty, of connection, and of love. I reached out and pulled him into a hug, holding him close, feeling his warmth and his strength. The embrace wasn't long, but it was full of everything we had learned about each other in the weeks since that fateful birthday. It was full of forgiveness, understanding, and the hope that we could continue to grow together. I love you, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I love you too, Mom, he replied, his voice thick with the same emotions I was feeling. As I pulled away, I looked at him and saw something new. It wasn't just the son I had been trying to reach, the son who had been angry, lost, and hurt. It was a young man, someone who had been hurt but who was now standing beside me, ready to move forward. We weren't perfect, but we were stronger. We had learned that healing didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, messy, beautiful process. And we were doing it, together. As the night wore on, we sat in comfortable silence, no longer filled with the heavy tension that had defined our relationship for so long. The space between us had finally shifted. I had stopped chasing the perfect moments, the perfect gifts, and had begun embracing the real moments, the raw moments, where we could truly see each other. I didn't need to prove myself anymore. The gift wasn't in the material things I had tried to give him. The real gift was the time, the effort, and the love we had put into this relationship. And that was the gift he had been waiting for all along. We had made it through the storm. And now, all that was left was the steady warmth of a bond that had been renewed. Not in perfection, but in the willingness to try, to understand, and to love. Weeks turned into months, and the changes that once seemed impossible began to feel natural. It wasn't that everything was fixed, or that we'd solved all of our problems. It was that we were learning to live with them. To coexist in a way that acknowledged the cracks and flaws, but didn't let them define us. There were days when I still wondered if I was doing enough. There were times when I caught myself slipping back into old habits, when I felt the pull of distractions, the weight of responsibilities tugging me away from the most important thing, my son. But each time I faltered, I reminded myself of the promises I had made, of the lessons I had learned, and of the love that had begun to flourish again between us. I watched my son grow, not just in height or age, but in character. He was becoming someone who could express his emotions openly, someone who wasn't afraid to ask for what he needed, and I was learning to become the mother he needed, a mother who listened, who understood, and who showed up, even when it was difficult. One evening, about 2 months after the emotional conversations we'd shared, I found myself sitting in the living room, a quiet evening wrapping around us. My son was on the couch, his legs stretched out in front of him, eyes glued to his phone as usual. But this time, there was a sense of peace between us, a familiarity I hadn't known before. It was different, comfortable. I was scrolling through a book, trying to wind down, when I glanced over at him. He wasn't the boy who stormed off in anger anymore. He wasn't the child who felt invisible in our home. He was here, present, just as I was, and it felt like a small victory. He looked up from his phone and caught my gaze, his expression warm. For a brief moment our eyes met and held, no words, just understanding. Then, after a long silence, he spoke. "Mom, you remember when I said you didn't see me?" He began. His voice was calm, almost like a confession. I put my book down and nodded. "Yeah, I remember." He smiled softly, not the kind of smile from months ago, one that hid frustration and hurt, but one that spoke of acceptance and quiet growth. "I think I get it now. Not just about you, but about me too. I was hiding a lot of stuff. I wasn't letting you see the real me. But I think I'm ready to be who I am. Without worrying about disappointing you or anyone else." I blinked in surprise, the weight of his words hitting me like a rush of air. The boy in front of me wasn't the same one who had demanded a gift and yelled at me for not meeting expectations. This was a young man, mature, thoughtful, and open to the possibility of change. "You don't have to worry about disappointing me," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You never have to worry about that. But I'm proud of you for seeing yourself clearly. I'm proud of you for being honest with me." He shrugged slightly, but there was something different about the way he held himself. He wasn't ashamed of his feelings anymore, not in the way he had been before. "I think that's what you've been teaching me. To see myself. To be okay with who I am, even when it's messy." We shared another moment of quiet, a sense of peace lingering between us. He wasn't asking for anything from me. He wasn't demanding or pushing for perfection. He had simply recognized the strength in both of us to keep going, to rebuild, and to find a way forward. We had both learned that perfection wasn't the goal. Being present, being real, that was what truly mattered. And just like that, the fear of losing him, of not being enough, of not meeting his expectations, began to fade away. It wasn't that I didn't still have doubts at times, or that I was somehow immune to the challenges of parenthood, but the heavy burden of uncertainty had lightened. I wasn't alone in this anymore. We were in it together. We had become a team, not just mother and son, but two people who respected and loved each other despite the flaws and failures. The next few months weren't without their ups and downs. Some days were better than others. There were moments when we still didn't understand each other completely, when I'd make a mistake and he'd get frustrated with me, or when he'd retreat into his world, leaving me wondering if we were back at square one. But then we'd talk, really talk, and I'd remember why it was all worth it. One evening, as I was cooking dinner, I saw him walk into the kitchen. I smiled at him over my shoulder, noticing the casual way he moved toward the fridge, as if everything between us was just as it should be. "You want some help with dinner?" he asked, his tone light, as if this was something we did every night. "Sure," I said, surprised by the question. "You know how to chop vegetables now, right?" He nodded, grabbing the cutting board. "I'll do it." We worked side by side in the kitchen, not saying much but finding a rhythm. There was something incredibly comforting about the silence between us, something that spoke volumes. It was a silence filled with understanding, with love that didn't need to be shouted, but only felt. And I knew, in that moment, that this was where we belonged, together. As we sat down to eat later that evening, he looked at me and smiled. A real, genuine smile. "Thanks, Mom," he said simply. "For everything." And just like that, I knew that we had come through it, not unscathed, not without our scars, but stronger for it. The gift wasn't in what we had given each other, whether it was presents or grand gestures. The true gift was in the space we had created for each other, the trust we had built, and the love that had been rekindled from the ashes of our past. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand, a simple gesture, but one that meant everything. "I'm proud of you," I said, "more than you'll ever know." And in that moment I realized that we had found what had been missing all along. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being real. About showing up, no matter how messy it got, and about loving each other through it all. The journey wasn't over. There would always be more to learn, more to navigate. But we were no longer